Just says Vinyl Side Chats has started recording.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I should have gotten water. Anyway.
So I always essentially like to start with how we got started in our area.
Okay.
So kind of like what made you want to pick up, kind of like what was music like for you, and what made you want to start playing?
That's a long time ago for me. I started playing acoustic guitar when I was 14, and I always joke that if people started playing when they were, like in puberty, then they tell you that it wasn't about meeting girls or boys, whatever you're into, then they're lying. That's really why I think all musicians started. If you're starting at like 14 years old, and that was certainly true of me. I mean, that was 1974. I had really long hair and an acoustic guitar. And that's what I was hoping to do is meet more girls. So, but I also had a chance to play acoustic guitar in church. I've talked about that in some videos. And I didn't appreciate, at the time, it was sort of something to do when I was going to church anyway. And it just seemed less boring than sitting there in church. But I didn't realize how amazing it would be as an opportunity to play music with other people so young. To play music with other people and just start doing that in a setting where it was not only just normal, but I was playing music with people that were much older than me. People that ran the folk group at the Catholic church I went to were, high school seniors, and to just kind of be a freshman in high school and be hanging out with seniors who also just treated you like a musician was a really cool thing. And the person that ran our folk group was extra cool, and she had us playing, like we'd do instrumental versions of John Lennon's Imagine. And we thought that was really, wild, because we knew what the lyrics said, but the old Italian ladies in the congregation didn't. So, we were just kind of smirking. And at the same time, it was like beyond the typical folk music. And I was playing music with other people, but not every week. So that was a really cool thing to do. And I played, it's interesting because I played acoustic guitar, with my family. It was the 70s. There was a ton of acoustic music, like the Eagles and, oh man, it's just Neil Young. There's just so much music in the 70s that I was getting to do. And I would do that with my family. And the funny thing is, there's 5 kids in my family. The funny thing is, now I have a nephew that plays guitar. I have a brother-in-law that plays guitar. And we don't really have family parties where everybody comes, where the acoustic guitars don't come out and we play and sing. And my mom's 86, and thank God she's still around. And there's nothing she likes better than that. So, which is very cool.
Yeah.
So that's how I started playing music. Oh, sorry, this texture. So typical YouTube thing here. I'll close that app. There. So, yeah, so that I think that's how a lot of people, start doing music, and my family really encouraged me to play guitar. And then when I went to college, and I wanted to learn to play, like El Di Meola or something, and they went, "Oh, no, it's college. You have to learn classical guitar." So that's what they taught me in college. I mean, now you can actually go study someplace and study jazz, God help you. But I couldn't then. So that was really good training, because I had played by ear before that. So that forced me to learn to read music, and it forced me to take music theory courses and all those kind of things. So yeah, I was listening to lots of different kinds of music across that time. So, and it's interesting, because your show is about, vinyl and listening and collecting and those kinds of things. I'm fascinated by collecting. In 2010, I actually sold my CD collection and digitized it, the whole thing, that, like 800,000 discs. And only this last year did I start buying things back, like things that I didn't want to have to rely on the internet to stream. I wanted to be able to just listen to a record. So I actually have some, and it's funny, I was just answering somebody's email where they're asking, like, what are the top 5 jazz records you would tell me to listen to as a jazz guitar player. So it was pretty funny. Anyway, so we can go there too. But
so kind of like with me, there was always music.
Yeah.
There was always music in the house.
Yeah.
And definitely, at least kind of like one of my earliest memories is we would always play artists like James Taylor,
Hmm.
and it would always be on the weekends. So every time when I listen to him, it's always like a good feeling.
Sure. Right.
But and definitely with playing an instrument, it didn't come until later. But my uncle plays guitar and sings,
Hmm.
so I think that definitely is one of the inspirations that got me playing. And also, my my grandma played piano,
Hmm.
so besides just listening to music, there was always musical instruments always somehow in the house.
Sure.
But I didn't start playing probably until about 12 or 13 or so.
Yeah.
But definitely, and it kind of has evolved to having that student big beginner guitar.
Hmm.
You would get like, I think I got it at Target, so it was one of those bundles.
Yeah.
So it came with one of those affordable Strats,
Hmm.
an amp, a
Yep.
case, and a strap. So I eventually started with that to eventually what I have now.
Hmm. Well, and the funny thing is, I was just watching a video about that I did the other day because I was talking to somebody who had been in the video, Mike Adams, who's sort of an offset guitar expert. He's going to be on my live stream this week, and you could buy a Fender Mustang with a Bronco amp as a kit, like even in the 60s, like in the mid
Yeah,
60s, they were already doing that. Now they've kept doing that all these years. It's really interesting, actually,
yeah,
that they do that. Yeah. Yeah. So you're into Rush?
yeah,
Yeah. See, so I remember Rush was like one of the bands that I listened to in high school, along with, I was really into progressive rock music. So I listened to tons of Genesis, Rush. Yes, they were like my trio. That's what the music I listened to, driving in my car. And then Genesis, morphed into Peter Gabriel and all that kind of stuff. I listened to all that through college, and then I got into jazz in college, and so I listened to that a lot as well. But that was at a time when you had to make your own cassettes to be able to listen to them in the car. So, but I got rid of all my records too at one point. I'm slowly sort of trying to figure out and rebuying what records have mattered the most to me over time. And some of those are here. I bought I try to like really limit myself to buying and really ask myself if that record was that important. So like this week I bought how do you get this on camera? It's not going to show up. Robin Ford's "Talk to Your Daughter." You should take it out of the sleeve, and then you'd be able to read it. But this record is one that so many guitar players, especially players my age, but really anybody who's into jazz and rock, are listening to "Talk to Your Daughter." I mean, and actually, I'm not sure this is in print. I bought a used one. I don't think it is in print, which is crazy because it's a wildly influential record, all the way from his tone to the way he played and mixed sort of jazz and blues and that kind of stuff. But that came much later. I didn't listen to Robin Ford. I'm probably at the time this record came out, which would have been early 90s. So they got a sticker right over it, of course. I just got this in the mail yesterday. So anyway. Oh, of course it doesn't want to come off. Anyway.
So kind of like whenever you plan on playing guitar, no matter if it's with other people or kind of like just at home, kind of like how do you plan on picking up whatever guitar you have and kind of like knowing?
You mean, how do I know you mean which guitar to use, or?
Well, that you plan on playing for that moment.
I mean, I basically, my life is kind of, as a musician now, is kind of split. I'm not gigging at all. I haven't gigged really in like 20 years. I've done some pickup things with singer songwriters where when I lived in Burlington, where I was just kind of background, or I actually had a band for a while with some friends there, but we didn't end up getting it together. Like the personnel kept changing. So mostly I practiced trying to play blues, crossing over into like jazz blues. And I have guitars that I use for that, but I'm actually in the moment of this Robben Ford thing is me realizing that this is the tone that I've always really resonated for me. Either, you know, he played sort of 335s or Les Pauls. But then there's this whole other side of me that played folk music and still plays folk music. So I have a couple of nice steel string guitars, and there's a part of me that, like, you know, adds songs to a book where I get together with other musicians and we play once or twice a month, and we all, you know, practice singing and playing tunes. And I said in the recent video that I did on inspiration that you know, having another group of people where everybody's going to take a turn singing, so it's not any scarier for you than it is for them, is incredibly supportive and wonderful. So I have a couple of acoustic guitars that I use for that, and actually one that I specifically bought. I have a very nice and expensive acoustic guitar that I had built for me, but I don't tend to take that everywhere. That might change, you know. I mean, like, I'm in my 60s, and it's sort of like, well, you're going to use your really good guitars. Like, why would you take like a backup guitar? If I was doing bar gigs, that might be different, but I just bought a Collings electric, and I'm going to switch from using PRSs and Gibsons to Collings, I think. And really part of that was the realization that Gibsons have gotten so expensive that they're the same price as Collings now.
Yeah.
So it's like I mean, almost. There's certainly a couple of the Gibsons I'm going to sell are probably worth about half what the Collings was worth, but it's like, how many, you know, it's like a video that I did 1 million years ago. How many guitars do you need?
Yeah.
It's like, you need to figure out who you are as a guitar player, find a tone, and stop spending so much time shopping. That's the theme of the channel. So I'm trying to take my own advice, which really I would tell you is the reason I built the channel in the first place, was to have a place to think those things through. Like, you know, how many guitars you need, but really what tones really resonate for me. What guitar sounds are the ones that I hear. What am I aspiring to be able to play, and kind of what voice does that have? So that's the tricky, I think that's the tricky part for all of us, because the media tells us that we should try to do it all, that we should try to be everything, that we should be able to play, you know, Dream Theater and country. You know, it's like, really? Like, how's that going to work out? That's not going to work out, you know? I mean, I guess if you could play Dream Theater, you might be able to play country, but it's like saying that you can play the blues because you can play pentatonic. No, there's a whole raft of subtleties, you know, that are that thing.
I actually saw a video that Rhett did about 5 guitars that you need to have.
Oh yeah, I've seen that video. Sure. Yeah.
But that kind of.
Yeah, what he doesn't say is it's the 5 guitars you need to have if you're going to be a studio musician making recordings at your house. I mean, there's like all these things that, I mean, it's kind of a classic YouTube title, and I could certainly make that video. My version of it probably would be the 5 guitars that companies tell you have to have. Yeah. I mean, maybe I should make that video. I think it's a good idea. I could say it was your idea. Because that is that thing, but that's not true at all. I mean, like, if you watch Robben Ford, oh, my monitor just blanked out. I've been having this problem with my monitor. You still there?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what's the problem here. Oh, and it didn't come back, because usually it comes right back. That's not good. That's back. Just check the output here. Back to the computer. That's not happy. Okay, we're back. Anyway, can't have that like when I'm doing a live stream. I'm in Chrome, and we're on Google Meets, which is usually happy stuff. Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, I'll close some other programs. Pull this out. Close these windows. What else is open? Close this. That's closed. Close this. Okay, there we go. We'll see if that works. Where was I? Oh, so yeah, I agree. I mean, you know, Robben Ford basically, he has a bunch of guitars, but he's either wearing a Les Paul or his Telecaster. And really, I think he's happiest when he's wearing his Telecaster. Yeah. This new PRS that he has is a guitar, but you don't see him playing it very often.
Yeah. I think it just depends on what situation that you're in. Like if you're someone that just plays at home for
Oh,
fun,
right. Yeah.
you might need just that one guitar.
Right.
But if you're like a session player or like a someone who travels and tours, then you might need like a handful.
Well, I would say actually, if you tour, then we're back to sort of what are you doing, and you really probably only need one guitar and a backup.
Yeah.
I mean, you people that have their voice, unless they made a record and then they have these different tones on the record that they feel they need to recreate.
Yeah.
So, like people like Ariel Posen, who I have tremendous respect for as a player, he's a singer songwriter probably first. He's a great guitar player, but he's really trying to recreate what he did on the record.
Yeah.
So because he's trying to recreate what's on the record, he's doing different. He's getting guitars that are tuned differently and all this kind of stuff. So that's a very different thing. I would say that even, you look at a lot of blues guys, even like I said, Robben Ford, top player in the world. He's out there with two guitars, or he's out there with one guitar, or he's got two guitars with him, and then he plays his 1960 Telecaster all night. So I've seen him do that. I like kind of showed up, hope he'd be playing a Les Paul because I love his tone on humbuckers. But he's one of those people that his hands are so loud. That's Paul Reed Smith said that Robben Ford has really loud hands. It's a really interesting way of saying it. Excuse me. When he plays Telecaster, it's almost hard to not tell it. It sounds almost like a Les Paul.
Yeah.
He just gets so much meat from that particular Telecaster. So. Yeah, that's kind of where I am too. I actually just bought, like I said, a hollow body Collings I-30 and their Les Paul, their CL with P90s. Both guitars have P90s. So that's kind of where I am right now, because it's sort of, they straddle the line between humbuckers and single coils. And I mean, those are two incredibly nice guitars. It's like, do you really need more than $10,000 for the guitars? And the funny part is people get like that. People are the same way about cars or whatever. It's like, well, you have 5 guitars. If you had 2, you'd have the same amount of money invested here.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's hard. I don't mean to make it sound easy. I'm 63 years old. It's hard to know sort of what matters, like what tone. I've been just as susceptible as the media. And there was a time in my life when I owned 36 guitars. So, and that was clearly not about playing guitar. That clearly was about trying to feel like I was a certain kind of guitar player, when in fact it didn't have anything to do with music.
Yeah.
It had to do with my identity.
So like my guitar collection is very minimal. I just have, I have like right here's actually so it's actually in the case right now, but it's actually an Epiphone acoustic that was made in the 70s. And I actually surprisingly got it in a pawn shop in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Nice. Because if the guitar was built in the 70s and it's an Epiphone, it probably was built in Japan, but right before that they were built in Kalamazoo.
Yeah. And I have so it's kind of like so it's actually a Telecaster style. And that's why I play the most, but it definitely fits kind of like the sound that's in my head, just because I grew up with the Telecaster sound.
Yeah.
Especially with bands like the Eagles.
Oh yeah.
Especially on those like early records.
Yep. Yeah, it's almost always Joe Walsh is playing the Tele, and then probably Don Felder on those early records was playing a Les Paul. He had a 59 Les Paul back then. At a time when 59 Les Pauls were just good used guitars. Yeah. If it's 1970, that guitar is 11 years old. So yeah, they were until about old Les Paul, burst Les Pauls began to be expensive and popular only after Eric Clapton, did what he did in 1964 with the Beano record. But it still took years for them to take off and become really valuable. I mean, really valuable, when those guitars were $10,000, people thought that was crazy. And now they're, $250,000. So
but like, as much as I would love to have one of those like 58 to 60 Les Pauls.
Sure, a burst. Yeah.
Yeah. But just the price of those are just way out of my
Yeah, no, I mean, I think they're to the point where none of us. But the good news is, like I said, if you listen to Robin Ford, he's had times when he's owned really nice, beautiful old Gibsons, and yet he's playing a Telly, and boy, you can get a great guitar, especially a really great Telecaster, for not a ton of money.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So besides a lot of like jazz music,
Mhm.
what kind of other genres and artists that you listen to?
Well, like I said, there was a time in my life when I listened to a lot of progressive music. I really like. I'm really, really into piano players. One of the first CDs that I rebought was Keith Jarrett's Cone Concerts, which is the biggest selling solo jazz piano record of all time, and the whole record is improvised. Like he
Yeah.
improvised the whole record, which is incredible. Record. I mean, there is mostly jazz on the table here. There's a Larry Carlton record that's blues called Sapphire Blue, which is again, like incredible. I was just listening the other day to Robin Ford and Larry Carlton live, which is a ridiculously good record. I think the one that was recorded in Tokyo was the one I was listening to. But I really like electronic music. I've always been really into electronic music as well, both all the way back to like Tangerine Dream, but modern electronic music like Olafur Arnolds, who's a soundtrack promoter, but he also did a bunch of techno records with a band called Kiasmos. It's a duo. I'm holding Brad Meldau, which is a jazz piano player again. But I just rebought Peter Frampton Comes Alive. It was a double record from the 70s. That was a really big record for me. And the other two records that are here are Led Zeppelin 1 and Led Zeppelin 4. It's like Led Zeppelin 4 was just massive. I mean, Stairway to Heaven. Oh my God. It's like you just, and you literally, the thing that I think we've lost, and I was talking about doing this is, and I'm no better than anybody else. And I think it's got to be even harder for people if they didn't grow up doing it. It's putting a record on and just listening to music.
Yeah.
People don't put on even one whole side. And I think it's because it's digital. And people, they stop in the middle of it. They're like, this is so incredible. Let me play it for you. And then they stop 2 minutes in, a minute in. And go, isn't that amazing? I'm like, well, let it play, and I think that's hard. The attention span question for all of us is really tough.
Yeah.
So I've been buying these CDs so I can just put them, and I bought a CD, actually bought a DVD player that played CDs. So I could just have no visuals, just have, and I have a nice, listening station in the basement, where it's just, a love seat, and there's a sub and two satellites that took me years to choose speakers. And I just try to listen to those. So I like a lot of different kinds of music. Probably if it's just sitting, I was just listening to Robin Ford in the car. But I had Eric Sky, who's an acoustic fingerstyle guitar player, on the live stream a couple weeks ago. Eric's amazing. So he had sent me a couple of his CDs, and they're just wonderful. There was a time in my life when I listened to a lot of Irish music, and I got to jazz through bluegrass because of the improvisation.
Yeah.
So I would say I like a lot of different kinds of music, though I don't listen to a lot of different kinds of music now. And I'm not probably likely to go to a bluegrass festival, even though the guys that I play music with kind of lean more in that direction, and I lean more in the pop direction. At these acoustic jams, when Gordon Lightfoot died, I did two of Gordon's tunes with that group, and everybody really liked it. It was really fun, to play over these things that we're playing on the radio when we were kids, because all these guys are about my age, or maybe at the maximum sort of 5 years younger than me and 10 years older than me. There's people in that group that show up to play who are in the early 70s, which is great. I think that's great. They're still out playing music with people.
Yeah. But I I'm kind of the same way. Like I listen to a lot of different styles. Like one of the records that I have is actually a Bill Evans. It's I think it's We Will Meet Again.
Okay.
And that definitely is one of the albums I enjoy listening to, especially all the way through.
Yeah. Bill Evans, is that a solo record or a trio record?
I think it's the Bill
Piano and
Evans trio.
trio, because he had two different trios. The if you're checking out Bill Evans, the ones that are thought of as like the records are the Live at the Village Vanguard records.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are just those. Everybody listens to those. I actually should have told this guy. He was asking me for guitar recommendations, but I recommended. Oh, I actually, it was funny. I was downstairs. I only own maybe 25 CDs now, but I had 2 copies of Miles Davis's Kind of Blue.
Yeah.
So I bought it, and then I was like, some other time I thought, I gotta have that. I bought it again, not remembering that I'd bought it. So classic American, moment in time, too much stuff. But I'll give the other copy away. It's just such an important record. It's the record I tell anybody who's sort of just starting in jazz to listen to, because it's this crossover moment in jazz history, and it's so blues based that it's very accessible, even though there's a lot of complex things happening on the record. That's an amazing record to listen to. So that's really cool that you've got like a Rush poster, but you listen to Bill Evans. It's great.
Like there are some days where I'll listen to bands like Rush or Genesis or Yes.
Mhm.
But there are moments where I'll listen to like jazz or country or pop, or like it's like it's like this like random.
Yeah, it's great. And I think that the time we live in, that's very possible. I always joke that I was in a jazz coma, that I only listened to jazz music for like 25 years. And one of the records that kind of broke me out of it was listening to Brad Paisley made an instrumental record called Play. And he had all these famous people on it, all these famous guitar players. It's a ridiculous record. And one of the things about it is his guitar tone is so good.
Yeah.
And it's not a tone that I would have ever thought of. He's playing, a Telecaster on the bridge pickup into an overdriven Vox AC30, which I wouldn't have associated with this sort of big fat sound that he gets.
Yeah.
But he does. Oh my, and that tone on that record, I was like, that's what I want. And frankly, he's a big Robben Ford fan. It's not a million miles away from the Telecaster tone on pretty much any Robben Ford record after he got his Telecaster.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's very cool.
So kind of like what have been some of your favorite guitar stores that you've been to?
Oh, so it's funny. I say this with the confidence that my 86-year-old mom doesn't watch the internet. That the first time I borrowed my parents' car, I told them I was going to town, and that's true. But I think they assumed incorrectly that I was just going to go into Lyons, which was about 3 miles from where I grew up. Instead, I drove to Rochester, and I probably wasn't a good enough driver to be in Rochester, but I drove to a guitar store that I always wanted to go to, which was the House of Guitars in Irondequoit. It was one of the first places I ever went, and I needed strings. Yeah. So that when I tell that story, it's like the first time I ever borrowed my parents' car was to go to the guitar store.
Yeah,
I was 16. So, or maybe 17. I don't remember how old I was when I got my last stock, but I was 17. Anyway, House of Guitars in Rochester, just outside of Rochester in Irondequoit, is wildly famous. The amazing thing is I actually visited there with a guy that I know through Instagram, who's an artist who also plays guitar. And he was in town because his daughter was looking at a college near Rochester. And I'm like, well, I'm only about, an hour and a half from there. I'll drive over and we'll go guitar shopping for the day. So we went to 2 or 3 guitar stores that I used to go to when I was a kid. It's funny. I've had 23 million views on YouTube now, but I don't get recognized. It's not like I'm there with Rick Beato. And, Beato and I are friends, since the late 80s when we both went, but his white hair and everything. People don't walk up to him and say, "Are you?" They know who he is. Yeah. They immediately know who he is. So we were talking about it just this morning on the telephone. I don't get recognized, but these are guitar stores I went to as a kid, and I was like hoping to have them let me play a guitar that I'd never be able to afford.
Yeah,
that was the classic thing. And the funny thing was now the owner, Bruce, recognized me and his staff recognized me, and all of a sudden they're like pulling out, rare guitars from cases and stuff. And I said, the funny thing is that, when I used to come here when I was 20, you guys wouldn't like even wait on me.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, well, we correctly assumed you couldn't afford it then. And we correctly assume you might be able to afford it now. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to buy this, 1966 Stratocaster. That's not going to happen today. That's never going to happen in my life, actually. And that place is still kind of funny. Everything's dirty and dusty, and the store really has not changed since I was going in there in the late 70s, and he hasn't changed and he must be, I'll bet you Armand and Bruce are 10 years older than me at least. They look the same. They look completely wiped out and stuff. And it's funny because I talked about being there on Instagram and people are like, oh yeah, the Hog, House of Guitars, Hog, the Hog. And they have bumper stickers that say support your local musician. And there's a picture of the store. And I've been looking at those bumper stickers on musicians' cars, since 1970s, since I got to drive around. So that's an amazing place. I went to Carter Vintage in Nashville. And that was an experience because, again, people in the store didn't recognize me, but Walter knows who I am from videos because I've interviewed him and talked to him on the phone a few times. And the videos that I did a video about Epiphone casinos, and Walter quite literally wrote the book. He wrote a book on the history of Epiphone that I used. And so he recognized me and his staff recognized me. And he was on a phone call, and I was standing at the counter talking to John Roncolato, who's the general manager there. And he wasn't asking me. He was reaching behind him, pulling like 1930 Gibbs Martin's acoustics and just handing them to me. Like I wasn't asking to see them. He's just handing me these guitars. I'm like, I don't want to play a guitar that's $60,000, or he asked me if I wanted to play the Burst in the cabinet. I was like, why? Why would I do that? And honestly, I have to say that none of those guitars haunted me. None of them. I have a 2006 Southern Jumbo that was built in the factory at the time when Ren Ferguson was running the factory in Montana. And, it gets to the level of who was running the shop at that time and the factory in Montana, and Ren set the factory up, and his son is a big time person in the industry that works for a different company now, but at one time did work for Gibson. And it's interesting to me. Like I talked to Ron Ellis, who's probably the preeminent pickup maker in the world. And I connected with him this week on the telephone. We're just like two kids talking about music because we're about the same age, from when we were kids. We're talking about like the records that were important and why we're still chasing Robin Ford's tone. And he's a Telecaster guy. And he's built pickups for Robin now, and he's sort of starstruck and I'm sort of starstruck by him. That's fun. I mean, that part of the channel is really fun for me, that I actually get to, meet some of my heroes, even though I'm not a musician, not remotely at their level. But it's fun to think of ways to help them, even if I'm helping them with their channels, like with their YouTube channels, musicians who are sidemen or something. And they're kind of going, especially during COVID, they were like, well, how do I do this where I actually make some money while I'm not touring? Yeah. That's a really legitimate thing, I think, for all artists to figure out a way to monetize the things that they do already is a really big deal. And that is something I do. And I worked a lot with Rick so that I had access to data 23 million is a lot of views, but Rick does 12 million views a month. The numbers are just insane. Yeah. I mean, he and I talk about it. It quickly gets to a point where you kind of really can't understand how they happen. And my numbers aren't even that big. I have 227,000 subscribers. But I get way more views, than I about 500,000 views a month, which is just, it's like, I just can't fathom that. So. Yeah. Again, this is not going to work out. I'm going to have to spend some time today playing with this.
So I think, well, at least like the main store that I go to is actually not too far away from me.
Yeah.
It's called a Impulse Music Co.
Okay.
And that's where I definitely get a lot of my strings, and sometimes I'll just go there just to talk and have fun.
Yeah.
but
Yeah, music stores can be a community thing.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
and there's this store, like kind of another guitar store that's actually up near Paso Robles. That's probably like 15 minutes south, and it's called Matt's Music, and
Okay.
and I've been going there for years, and it's very chill.
Hmm.
And kind of same thing. I'll just go there just to talk.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. I always say that the loss of guitar stores is a loss of sort of a center of community, even if it's right down to the, having a bulletin board where people are advertising for a guitar player or a bass player or a singer,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Guitar stores can be that. And I've certainly enjoyed that over the years. And I'm working with Ish Guitars, who is a great guitar store here in Syracuse. It's actually one of the reasons I live in Syracuse. It's close enough to my family so I can go out and see them regularly, but at the same time, it gives me a chance to work with a local store and help promote them. I'm making 2 videos with them this summer where the guys on the staff are doing a bunch of the guitar playing. So it's very cool to do that. And, like, it was funny. I went in and I was going to use this one guitar player. So I took one of my denim shirts. I'm like, here, Jay, put this on. He's like, wait, is this one of the real shirts? And I'm like, yeah, it's a Levi shirt. Calm down. It's just a shirt. He's like, can I have this? Yeah, sure. I'll expense it. Don't worry about it. It's very funny. This is not the shirt. I have a shirt that I've made all the videos in, but it's starting to get faded. I have to start breaking in another one. This one's a little dark, but the other one's a little too light now. Anyway, it's very funny. I watched a video with a friend of mine the other day, and she's like, is this the same shirt? I'm like, yeah, the video is just 2 years ago, so it's very funny.
But I think one store that I do want to visit that's here in LA is it's Norm's Rare Guitars.
Yeah, Norms. Yep, sure.
But I think that's probably like 40 minutes south of where I am.
Oh, okay.
But especially here in LA,
yeah,
the traffic is just.
Yeah, no, I actually did a bunch of consulting in Silicon Valley in my career in higher education, and I know what you mean. It's like it could be 10 miles and take you an hour to get there.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Right.
It's just knowing the right time.
Yeah.
On when the traffic isn't as bad.
Sure. Well, and going to a place like Norm's, it's kind of like it's like Walter Carter asking me if I wanted to play Ed King's Stratocaster that he wrote, Sweet Home Alabama on.
Yeah.
Like, no. What would I learn by doing that? And it's like, but it's funny because there was also a time when I was the advisor to a group that brought famous jazz musicians to campus at Binghamton when I worked at SUNY Binghamton. And you quickly realize that these are just folks.
Yeah.
Especially, famous musicians, if they've worked as musicians their whole life, then they're just cool people.
Yeah.
Otherwise they wouldn't keep working. People wouldn't hire them if they were a pain,
That it was at some small venue here in LA, like just like one of those like bar-sized venues.
Yeah.
And it was actually to see Chris Shiflett, and he plays guitar for the Foo Fighters.
Okay, right. Yeah. Chris Shiflett, yeah.
And he was, of course, he's used to playing at places like Wembley, which is like 80,000 people.
Yeah, right.
Like he's playing at like bars that fit like 100 people.
Yeah, when he's out with his solo group with his own side project, then I remember he did a rig rundown and he was like, well, I wouldn't carry this on the road with my band, but when I'm out with the Foo Fighters, that's a whole other thing. Or like here's a guy playing bars and he's got a signature Fender a Telecaster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But while I was at this like little bar to see him, I actually had the chance to meet him.
Oh, exactly. Right. You can just walk up to him because he's just a guy doing a gig, right? Yeah.
I probably talked to him for like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Extremely down to earth.
Yeah. People like that are chill. If these guys weren't a good hang, they wouldn't be in some of the biggest bands in the world.
Yeah.
The bands that last, everybody in the band's got to be a little bit easy to get along with. Yeah. Otherwise the band wouldn't have lasted. That guy would have gotten kicked out of the band a long time ago. Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting. And it's a great reminder that they're just folks.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is a really great reminder. And it's wonderful. And you realize that these things are all within reach for the same reason. Yeah. That's actually very cool. Yeah. So if you had to pick, this is like, I thought this is what you're going to ask me. If you had to pick 5 records, you can only keep 5 records. Do you know there's a famous, I think it's a radio show in England called Desert Island Discs, right? You know this thing? And they have people come on, famous people, whether they're musicians or not, and say what their 10 records that they couldn't live without are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me your 5 records. They don't have to be in the same genre, obviously, but like, what's your 5 records? Because that's kind of what I'm doing here, rebuying my CDs, is going, what records do I want to have I could just pull out and play on CD?
I think if I was to choose 5,
Yeah.
it would be Rush's Snakes and Arrows album.
Okay.
James Taylor's Greatest Hits. It's a band called the name of the band is called Skillets, and the album is Rise.
You mean the one over your shoulder?
Yeah.
You always have to think about what's in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if like this was count as one, but definitely the Lord of the Rings soundtrack.
Huh. Okay. Nice.
And I think this might be weird, but it'll be this Bill Evans album that I have.
Yeah, that's great. No, nothing. There's no such thing as a weird like. I used to say I used to do college admissions really early in my life, and I used to say that the only dumb question is the one you don't ask.
Yeah.
You know, I think the same thing as music. Like it's only dumb to be embarrassed by, people always say, what's a guilty pleasure? And I love it when guys who are in heavy bands, they're like, oh, there's this Olivia Newton-John record that my mom used to play when I was a kid. And whenever I put that on, I just feel calm. And I'm like, that's great that you just say that right in public, And my father grew up on a farm. I grew up on a farm. And my dad went to college. He was an art professor, art teacher, and then an art professor, art education. But he got to college at Syracuse, and his college roommate was a classical piano major. So my dad started listening to classical music at college. And so there was a lot of that in my house when I was a kid. And I would tell you that I kind of burned out on the Beatles and classical music from my childhood. Like I wasn't interested. They made me study that stuff in college. I wasn't that really interested. And I like to think I have an appreciation. But I would have to admit that like when I hear NPR, National Public Radio playing in the background and it's classical music, it sounds like, I'm doing a project with my dad.
Yeah.
And my dad's been gone for about 10 years. So it's interesting music that might feel like a guilty pleasure, but it has an association,
Yeah.
and that's, I think that's beautiful in a different way.
So I do have to ask this kind of, what would be your 5?
Oh, my 5. So I'm going to say right off, my buddy Rick does these top 20 lists. He always calls me, he often calls me and says, what's on your list? What would be in your top vocalist list or something? And I don't have anywhere near the breadth of experience he has. So he always says the last 5 could be in any order. These could be in any order. Miles Davis is Kind of Blue. It's just such an incredible record. I will tell you that there's a thing that happens on the tune So What at the beginning where he goes from brushes to sticks only with one hand at first, and then he switches to 2 hands. I still get chills. Like when he lays into the ride cymbal playing quarter notes, I get chills with this record still. That I just bought Robin Ford's Talk to Your Daughter, and I was listening to it in the car. I was like, how did I live without this record? I cannot believe how great the guitar tone that he's getting on this record. And I think this record is like 1994. Oh no, it's like 1988. The print is just ridiculously small. 1988. So that would definitely be in my top 5. Keith Jarrett's Colon concerts, also because I listened to that record so much when I first got out of college. And it's funny, people like famous jazz musicians or famous musicians will say that, records or even CDs when they started were so expensive. If you were a musician, you couldn't buy one every week. You had to
Yeah.
buy one. Maybe you had enough money to buy one once a month. So you had to listen to the record for a month. And Branford Marsalis told me when I met him that like guys, they used to trade, records. Like you buy the new Sonny Rollins record and I'll buy this old Charlie Parker record and we'd trade. So there were times, like I said, some of these records were from that time. Colin concerts. I grabbed these off the shelf. These are like all the CDs I own currently. Yeah, there's another actually, wow, 2 Keith Jarrett records in the same pile. I don't think I could put that. I would have to say Led Zeppelin 4. And I'm gonna qualify that. I was never a big fan of Robert Plant's voice. And I love Rush, but really high singers like that are challenging to me.
Yeah.
It was all the guitar playing on that record. And come to find out, the guitar solo on Stairway to Heaven is a Telecaster.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of the Telecaster, if you will. It was the Dragon Telly that, had been owned by the guys in the Yardbirds, etc. So, what's that for? That's only 4. Hard not to say Brad Paisley's Play.
Yeah.
It's so many different styles of music, but that music got me playing blues and sort of Americana. Again, I literally put together an Americana band with a singer that I knew. She was an amazing singer. And then I put she actually had been Miss Vermont, and she didn't really have much of a rock and blues singing background, but she wanted to do that kind of music. And I remember asking another guitar player if he was interested in being in the band. I thought I was going to have to talk him into it. He's one of the best guitar players in Burlington, a guy named Kevin Boyer. And I said, hey, I'm putting together a band. It's going to back up Ashley Wheeler. It would be cool. He goes, you mean the woman that was Miss Vermont? I'm like, yeah. He's like, I'm in. And I would keep trying to talk him into it. He's like, no, I'm in. I'll do it. I'll totally do that. And, it was very funny because she's a very pretty girl. Yeah, I mean, all of that. There's so many records, but I would say that would be my top 5. I did a live stream only for my Patreon people years ago. I think mostly because my editor wanted to talk about his top 10, because his top 10 is like wildly divergent. He loves folk music and he loves really crazy dark metal, Scandinavian metal, which I have so much respect for people that have that much breadth, or like you, where you're going, this pop record and then this heavy band and then this Bill Evans record. That's great. And I love that we live in a time where that's easy to do.
Yeah. Well, especially now with stuff like Spotify or Pandora.
Yeah. Right.
Like, with all these streaming platforms.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's just so easy to access all that stuff now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
So this kind of was inspired by like the whole motto of your channel. So like if you were to have like a desert island guitar or like setup, kind of like what would it be?
Well, it's funny. I said on an Instagram post recently, I don't know how much of this stuff I would own I don't know how much of this stuff I'll keep when I stop doing the channel.
Yeah.
And somebody wrote in the comments, you're not authorized to stop doing this. You have to keep doing this forever. I'm like, oh no, there's going to be a point when I stop doing this.
Yeah. I'm
trying to do that now. I bought these 2 Collings guitars. It's $11,000 worth of guitars. So, but it's what, and I'm selling some PRSs, which, I don't own guitars that aren't amazing. I mean, and frankly, at this point in my life, I shouldn't. It's like my friend Jeff Mackerlane always says he does it for a living. I don't play guitar for a living, but I do understand the market and I talk about the history of guitars for a living. If I had to do it all, I don't think I have that guitar yet. I love the sound of a Telecaster, but I don't love the ergonomics of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a plank with a baseball bat attached, or Brad Paisley said, it's a stick nailed to a cutting board or something like that. Yeah. Or, people talking about them as being canoe paddles. I have a lot of hope for the Collings. Collings makes this Les Paul style guitar, but I'll bet you it's going to be too heavy for me. And then they make the guitar I bought is kind of more hollow body sounding. I just got it yesterday. So I spent a whole bunch of time, or I guess Friday, 2 days ago, I spent a lot. I've been playing it a lot this weekend, obviously, but it sounds more acoustic. And they make one with a center block, and I'm thinking that guitar would weigh like less than 7 pounds. And really, a lot of the Robben Ford music was, you know, with a Les Paul scale, a Gibson scale guitar, semi-hollow, humbucking pickups. You know, so I'm thinking that, you know, sell more guitars, but I'm talking about buying 3 guitars and selling like 9 guitars. I currently own 11. 3 of them are Strandbergs. And one Strandberg was for a specific video that I'm making with the store called Bar Rigs of the Future, where it's like a single bridge pickup Strandberg that weighs less than 5 pounds, a Line 6 Catalyst, and a HX Stomp XL. I mean, you could have ridiculous variety of tones with that simple rig. And most guys that play bar band music, blues rock, will tell you that they live 95% of the time on their bridge pickup anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's a beautiful guitar. I don't know if I'll keep that one. I'm going to sell most all the PRS guitars, even the fancy ones, and replace them with these Collings guitars. I just really love the ethos of Collings. And like I said, I've realized that the guitars I was playing from PRS are the same price.
Yeah.
You know, they're $4 or $5 grand, $6 grand a piece. So, you know, having fewer and better has always been a hallmark of the channel. And I haven't really pushed myself on it, but that's what I'm trying to do now. So maybe one would be this I-35 that I'm thinking of buying, but it might be that P90 Les Paul. Who knows?
I think it definitely would like probably be like a Telecaster, but maybe I might do like a humbucker and like a single coil, so I have like options.
You know, humbucker in the bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe like I'm not like that big into pedals,
Right.
so I just might plug straight into like a maybe like a AC30.
Yeah.
But like
I have a Victory VC35, which is a Victory copper, which is basically like an AC30 general style amp, but it has more gain. So you really don't need pedals with it. And it would be amazing. Yeah. I mean, honestly, and if it was a single amp, I don't really think I own the single amp that I would use except for something like that. I think that would be amazing. So. Yeah, so I guess that would probably be the answer right now. Is it might be this Collings CL City Limits guitar is having a pick guard put on it, because I'm kind of a finger rest guy, and so I'm having the pick guard put on. So that guitar won't be here until probably late next week, sometime. So maybe that'll be it, and then I'll be done.
Yeah.
Or maybe I should be saying that the only guitar that I would never sell is the acoustic guitar that, you know, was built for me, you know, with wood from my family farm. Because it's true, I would never sell that guitar.
And that actually just made me think of the video that you did where it talked about Brian Mays.
Oh yeah, right.
And
The guitar he built with his dad. Yeah.
Yeah, on how he essentially put that from scratch with stuff around the house.
Yeah, exactly. Well, really cool stuff from around the house that his father had. You know, it was at a time where his father had, you know, a piece of oak that was 400. Somebody wrote in and they're like, no, it wasn't 100 years old. It probably was 400 years old.
Yeah.
You know, and it was so hard that they couldn't even use chisels on it and stuff. Yeah, that's a great story. I actually was in touch with 2 of the guys. The guy that I used a lot of photographs, Greg Fryer, wrote me an email, and he's like, this is such a good video. He wrote a comment, such a good video. I don't even mind that you used a bunch of my pictures. I'm like, I wrote to you, you didn't write me back. And then the other guy, I'm going to blank, and I apologize. Andrew Geyer, I think his name is. It's incredible. Yeah, Guyatone, right. He was a prince. He's just the nicest guy. He immediately wrote back. He was like, thanks for asking. You have permission to use anything from my page. And his guitars are absolutely beautiful, just beautiful guitars. So yeah, I think that just reminds us, everybody, that it's in your hands, it's in your head. You know, go listen to lots of music. This guy was asking me which books he should read about jazz. I'm like, don't buy books, buy records.
Yeah.
You know,
so I was talking to someone about this, but even if you had all that gear of the person you're trying to replicate, it'll be hard to copy them exactly because you don't know how much pressure they're putting on the fretboard or how hard they're plucking.
Absolutely. Right. There's so many variables. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or, Robin Ford is famous for saying that early in his career, he was basically copying everything he could from Paul Butterfield.
Yeah.
And yet you listen to early Robin Ford, he sounds just like him. He doesn't
Yeah.
sound like him. He doesn't sound like Paul Butterfield.
Yeah.
He sounds like Robin Ford,
Yeah.
I mean, I have a record of his that he made before he was, with the Jazz Crusaders or whatever. It's like before he was in the Yellow Jackets, before any of that, when at a time when, Alexander Dumble famously saw him playing in a bar in San Francisco, with a tube screamer into a basement, and he still sounded like he was playing through a Dumble,
Yeah.
that was the big inspiration. So I think there's a bass player who said that, a guy who's got a channel that I really like. And he said, it doesn't start with your hands, even, it starts with your head. It's
Yeah.
like, what do you want it to sound like?
Yeah.
Chase that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really great thing. And then again, I'm back to go listen to a bunch of records.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's definitely one skill that I'm trying to learn is definitely like I have taken guitar lessons,
Mhm.
but lately I've definitely been playing along to records and just like trying to like get better and not really replicate those players, but at least like, become a better player.
Yeah. Well, and listen to what they're playing and try
Yeah.
to, try to redo that. Trying to turn
Yeah.
off the auto, the thing that keeps closing the thing here. Turn the displays on and off. I don't want to turn it off. We're almost done, so I'm gonna have to find it afterwards, but I need to get it out of there. Anyway. Yeah, that's exactly what you should do. You should spend time doing it, spend time listening, and talking to people and getting recommendations. I mean, a lot of the music that I have learned to love over time, somebody else said, "Did you ever check this out? Did you ever listen to this?" And it's exactly what you need to do. Right.
I think that's definitely one reason why I enjoy doing stuff like this is just being exposed to more music.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But I think that wraps up this whole episode.
Cool. Yeah. Well, so how do you build these now? You go in and edit them, and you take out the me stumbling on and looking at my monitor and stuff like that, or do you just put them up?
I'll actually just put them up.
Okay.
Well, just because I like them to be as natural as possible.
Sure. That makes sense. Yeah. Cool. Good. All right. Well, hey, Mike, it was nice meeting you, and good luck with your show. And thanks for asking.
Thanks.
Okay. Take it easy. Bye-bye.
Bye.